Arteta! What a strike! What a screamer! Zola! And a fantastic goal! Arsenal back in it! And here's Limpar, lines it up, finds the net. Arsenal in front.
Crushing defeat at home leads to European exit at the hands of Italian giants. But enough about Spurs, and hopefully not us. This is the Arsenal Vision post-match podcast. My name is Elliot Smith, and you can block me on Twitter at Yankee Gunner. That's right, can't smile without them. Spurs crashed out in heartbreaking fashion at home to Italian giants after a good away leg. And before we get tucked into that, let's just remember that we put ourselves in position to do the very same thing. Hopefully we will not. We've got a bumper pod for you. Scott will be along momentarily. We've got a bonus section at the end, far better than the bonus section at the end last time. And here for the main section...
Shit.
You can hear him already. His name is Paz, Paul. You can find him on Twitter at Paz in my pants. Hello, Paz.
Woohoo!
Tim is back. Tim is here. Tim is wise, and we are pleased to have him back from Milan. You can find him on Twitter at Stilberto. Hello, wise one.
Hello there.
How was the shit-infested stadium?
Yeah, it's still infested with shit, actually, and it's not a place I would advise taking a shit either. But yeah, there we go.
Yeah, I saw you posted pictures on social media of the hole that passes for a toilet.
The latrine.
Before he used it.
I guess you're just supposed to squat over that thing and have a go, huh?
I guess so. Luckily, I didn't feel. My curiosity didn't stretch that far.
Yeah. By the way, agreed.
What did stretch that far?
Already the most enjoyable round of 16 in the Champions League from the last 6 seasons. Yeah,
definitely. Yeah.
Definitely. Okay, good. Well, enough about that. Let's talk about. It says here, Arsenal win. Is that right? Do I have that right? Okay, let's do that then. So, Tim, I'll start with you. The lineup looked very familiar to lineups we have trotted out there with not great results recently, and I have to admit that I was kind of hoping the manager would just try something different, but he trusted in the players that he's been trusting in, and they did get him the performance, to be fair. But when you saw the lineup, and then when you saw how they were being deployed, what were your thoughts?
Yeah, it didn't surprise me that much. I wondered if he might drop El Neni in to try and do that hybrid defensive midfield stroke centre-back thing. But other than that, there weren't too many other changes that I could think of because of injury and people being cup-tied and et cetera, and we really don't have anyone else that can play right wing-back. So I think once Bellerin was ruled out, the idea of playing three at the back was kind of kiboshed, really, and Chambers can loosely only play right back in a back four, and even that's slightly debatable, I think. He's certainly no right wing-back, so... I don't think with the options we had available we were ever going to go three at the back. And so it was pretty much what I expected. The only two players I thought might, like I said, El Neni, maybe Iwobi. And actually he ended up playing Jack in the kind of Iwobi role, which I thought was quite interesting because I thought on first inspection, I wondered if Ramsey might go over to the right with kind of Ozil in the middle and Mkhitaryan on the left. But that's not the way it panned out at all. In fact, Ramsey, who I'm sure we'll talk about a bit more as the pod develops, but he actually played a very, very disciplined role in the first half. He really was part of a double pivot in front of the back four, which was quite interesting because I thought that Wilshere would play there alongside Xhaka. I think what that shows you is that Arsene Wenger trusts Ramsey a bit more than he trusts Wilshere, because generally... he pushed Wilshere out wide left in the second half anyway. Wilshere was kind of in the number 10 and then kind of, he was more willing to move him around, whereas he obviously felt that Ramsey was much more pivotal to the performance, which proved to be right on the day given their respective performances. Although had Wilshere played in central midfield, he might have performed slightly better. But so that was... Once I saw the lineup, that was the only slight surprise. I thought that Ramsey might be part of that three behind Danny Welbeck, particularly because we know that Danny Welbeck, in terms of scoring you a goal, has never been super reliable and certainly isn't at the moment. And I wondered if you might try and push Ramsey up alongside him a bit. And actually, we saw that with Ramsey's goal anyway. It's just he really picked his moment to go forward right at the end of the half. So, yeah, I wasn't hugely surprised. I thought that maybe Iwobi instead of Wilshere, maybe Elneny instead of Wilshere. But ultimately, it was more or less what I expected. And I think, you know, the decision to have Ramsey there in front of the back four really just spoke to probably the acknowledgement that we weren't playing three centre-halves. You know, we were playing two centre-halves who were quite low on confidence, and we saw them at Brighton on Sunday turn the ball over quite a lot. I think just because the gap between the defence and the midfield has been a little bit big. And I think Ramsey was asked, you know, to create a bit more of a kind of dotted line there so that we didn't expose the centre-backs on the ball, which was a really interesting development, because you'd think that that plays to Wilshere's skill set. But, I don't think he's in a particularly good vein of form at the moment anyway.
No. And some of that has to do with, I mean, the manager has decided to play him nominally as a 10 when I think... based on his legs and where he is in his career right now, he probably needs to be a little deeper. So do you think he's just kind of being exposed in a position that maybe just isn't suited for him at the moment?
A bit, yes, because it means he has to kind of receive the ball, you know, not quite with his back to goal, but, you know, so he's receiving it in tight spaces, you know, on the half turn. And I don't think that really suits his skill set. Or at least what really used to was kind of driving from deep. I'm not sure if he's got the legs to do that anymore. And the question for his career is whether he can reinvent himself as, you know, more of a kind of, I suppose you'd say, Pirlo type, a deep-lying playmaker who doesn't have to run very far or very fast. You know, the fact that Arsenal preferred Ramsey in that deep-lying playmaker role, I think possibly says quite a lot about how he views Wilshere at the moment.
Yeah, I don't know that he has the hair for the Pirlo role either, by the way.
No. And I think it's just a bit of a, you know, it's also an admission that one of the things we really miss in the final third is a ball carrier, someone who is capable of dribbling and opening teams up that way. You know, we lost Rosicky, we lost Chamberlain, we've lost Sanchez.
We didn't lose them. We know where all of them are, just for the record.
Well, yeah, we didn't... Yeah, but they're not in the team anymore. Basically,
yes.
We can locate them. They're just not.
You just have to look up the table, Tim. They're right up there.
Yes,
there's a WhatsApp group apparently. So,
but that's largely why we play Iwobi so much, even though his form's quite patchy. Although, you know, I think he gets criticised possibly slightly more than he deserves. But
we know you think
because. But not too much, not too much. He is very patchy, but it's because we really miss a ball carrier there. And I think what Arsenal is hoping and thinking is just, you know, if I can just get Wilshere on the ball in that final third, facing play, facing defenders, then maybe he can create something. Because Ozil's not that player. Mkhitaryan, he kind of is and isn't that player at the same time. And I think basically he just really wants a ball carrier in that front three. And you know, the only options we have in the squad are Iwobi, who's not convincing, and Wilshere, who is also not convincing in that position. So, yeah, it is a little bit of that, I think. But also, I think his Arsenal career is probably drifting to a fairly inauspicious close at this stage.
Well, on that happy note, let's bring Paul into the conversation. I expressly said to Tim before this pod got underway, Tim, I want this to be a happy, cheery pod exclusively. And he said, go fuck yourself. So, Paul, as far as the early stages of the game, I think it set out kind of the way you might have expected, even if I expected it to just be us losing 7-0. And what I mean is they looked nervous, which a lot of our Europa League opposition have looked early. Recognizing that they're playing ostensibly a big club in a big league, and maybe not seeing the weakness of the side, but at the same time they really
Arsenal.
the mighty Arsenal, exactly, the mighty gun, up the gun. Anyway, they wanted to have a go at us, but they seemed a little nervy. We had that sloppiness that has been a feature of our game for several months now, and it produced a sort of open but sloppy period, and it culminated, prior to us getting really our hands around the match, in a penalty shout for them. So just really quickly, talking about refs is boring and refereeing decisions is boring, but I think this one was pretty borderline. So I'm curious to get your thoughts on the Ospina penalty shout. He comes out, he gets nothing, he obstructs the player's running angle. The player is able to kind of get over him and then goes to ground after another step. Do you think it should have been a penalty?
I think my reaction to it was, yikes. He absolutely gave the referee a decision. And I think based on how those things go, it was probably better than a 50-50. I mean, the guy kind of hurdled him, kept his feet. So on the day, was there contact or significant contact? Maybe not, but only because the dude didn't drag his feet. Harry Kane would have dragged two of his feet and one of Dele Alli's. Mm-hmm. So we're a very lucky boy, David Ospina. It does jump me straight forward to, we make the Europa League final and so much is resting on it. You know, it's one of those things where Arsene gets to show his integrity by keeping with the promises he made at the start of the season. But Stan Kroenke probably has a view on it. Josh
I don't
Kroenke,
think he would even be able to name our keepers, if we're being honest.
No, but he'd get an incoming call about they're going to play David Ospina in the final, and he's going to ask, who's David Ospina?
Well, he's going to do a quick YouTube search and immediately decide it's the wrong move.
Yeah, exactly. So, like,
that wasn't his only spotty moment in the game, by the way. There was the corner where he came for it and got nothing and was lucky that the header glanced wide. Yeah,
he did a couple of good things too, but that's not what I'm looking for when we go to the final. I'm not looking for two clangers we survive and two good moves he should have made anyway.
Okay, so before we just spend the whole time beating up on Ospina, though, so as far as those early stages, I mean, we had some chances, too. There was the one where Jack and Mesut combined to get the ball over to Mkhitaryan, and he fired just wide. The game had a real openness to it.
Which was a good warmer-up for what he was about to have to do the second time.
And I actually felt he should have hit the target there, Paul. So here's my question. Do you think that the reason for the resurgence, at least specifically with respect to players that have been struggling, players like Xhaka, players like Mesut, players like Mkhitaryan, who I thought was sensational in the first half, after playing Spurs and City twice, where they just suffocate you, do you think the way Milan sat off us really brought these players to life, that they've been on the rack so much with intense pressure for multiple games now, that extra beat of space on the ball really felt like minutes to them because of the intensity that they had been facing?
I don't say this often, but that's a brilliant point. One of the reasons,
you don't say it often. It's right. It's true all the time. But
true. One of the things I like about basketball, which I don't really watch anymore, is when they go to the playoffs and they play the same team 7 times, because you make these adjustments game to game. And one of the things I would have hoped we would have done over the last couple of seasons is get better and better against teams who press us. And
narrator voice incoming. They didn't.
Yeah, well, we don't against them. But to your point, it's like suddenly the oxygen gets sucked into the room, and the space is there when you play against Milan, because it's not like they didn't press us. They just didn't press us particularly well.
For the first 60 minutes, they sat off a lot.
A lot, but they didn't sit off. You know what I mean? They didn't sit off. They just, relative to a Spurs or whatever, there's still plenty of pressing, but they're arriving a yard late, and a yard is all the space in the world to a good footballer. On the Jack thing, I thought it was interesting. I thought he had a decent first half. We talked about this on the old WhatsApp. Mm-hmm. I thought he was terrible in the second half.
It was really scary.
And not necessarily just in terms of his performance. I'm not sure what he was in the second half. At the start of the second half, there's a couple of times Kessié runs past him, and Jack shrugs. But it's funny, because it's not like he runs past him and he thinks it was his job. He shrugs to Xhaka a couple of times, and Xhaka kind of apologizes to him that he didn't kind of pick him up, and that Xhaka wasn't further up the field. But it made no sense to me that Xhaka would be the guy who'd be coming up to pick him up. I mean, it would have pulled him right out of position, our most defensive of players. So I'm really puzzled. It made sense to me what we were doing with the 3 in midfield in the first half when you watched it play out, and we were more attacking there. So maybe it was always going to make sense. What's odd about Jack is that he keeps playing 90 minutes.
Yeah,
and I
could
don't
not
think it was
believe the manager left him on when he made that substitution for Mesut Ozil. He was, Jack himself was crying out to be taken off the pitch at that point.
Yeah, and he's played a lot of 90 minutes. And in the Spurs game, I think he did okay against Dembele in the first half. And from the minute the whistle blew in the second half, Dembele blew past him. But in this game, it wasn't particularly that he didn't have the legs. I mean, we weren't that knackered. He'd just come out after halftime. I'm just puzzled by did he invent his own role at the start of the second half? It was very odd.
Well, he couldn't cover the ground anymore, and I think that 10 forces him to make sprints that he can't make and recovery runs he can't make, so he just started dropping in deeper. And that's ad hoc analysis. I totally understand that, but I mean, he also got bailed out a lot, Paul, on the ball. Go ahead.
I was just going to say, I don't know that he didn't have the legs at that point of the game. It's like he didn't think it was particularly his job, and I don't know what his job would have been. But anyway, enough on Jack. We were supposed to be playing a Christmas tree formation by many people at the start of that game. It's absolutely not what we did, obviously.
I thought it looked more like a 4-1-4-1, kind of like we'd done with El Neni, but with Xhaka playing the El Neni role and dropping in between the center backs to pick the ball up at times.
Yeah, though I do think there was tremendous balance between him and Ramsey. Obviously, he was a bit more defensive.
Tim alluded to that, yeah.
Yeah, and to me, that was the secret of the whole game. Those two and Mkhitaryan, who hadn't quite realised just how active he'd been in the game, despite all the eye-catching stuff he did. I mean, in the first half, he had that basically the same shot, the same cut onto his right foot 3 times, hit the post, hit the bar the third time. He had 9 dribbles in the whole game. I mean, that's amazing. 6 from Kolasinac, so that's 15 from that wing, and that was where all our attacking production came from. So those guys really kind of hit a groove going forward. I thought, obviously, Ozil, Jack, Ramsey, all doing their bit to connect the play, but that really seemed to be where our strength came from, because there was a lot of talk about there was no width in this team. And there's a point to that, but you could see Ozil and Mkhitaryan continually working from wide towards the centre, or Ramsey working from wide towards the centre. But I also think it's because Milan weren't very good. I mean, they just weren't tight at the back. And you see it on Ramsey's, our second goal. I mean, he did brilliantly and Ozil did brilliantly, but the gaps are there to be exploited, man.
Well, and you know, I wrote in my little game notes at one point, I sense if we were sharper, we could be out of sight, because the spaces and the gaps were appearing. And Tim, out of curiosity, I mean, do you think that maybe Gattuso looked at us and looked at our form in the league and said, we can have a go at these guys? If we, you know, kind of what you said, that these smaller teams should be having a go at us, but that the way they did it was really odd. They pushed their fullbacks up, they got really high up the pitch, and then gave us chances to counter. Do you think that maybe they overestimated our slump and their willingness to come at us, not with a press per se, but just to push resources into the attacking half, gave us that platform to counter them and create chances ourselves?
And can I give Tim some quick props on WhatsApp? He called this one. I was pretty nervous about it, but Tim really thought we'd have a good go at these guys, and they were there for the taking, ironically.
If you check my Twitter feed, you'll see that I routinely and regularly predicted we would win this match comfortably. So.
Okay.
Yeah. I think the way I'd sum up my feeling before the match was I wasn't scared of AC Milan, I was scared of Arsenal.
Well said. Well said. That's why we have you on, because you say good stuff.
But I kind of tend to think, I mean, I don't watch a lot of AC Milan, but I could really imagine that Gattuso is just the type of manager that would just kind of, maybe I'm doing him a disservice here, but would just kind of go Mel Gibson, Braveheart style, you know? And
not a tactician, but a motivator.
Yeah. And I'm sure they had the conversation before the game, understandably, about, you know, Arsenal being in a bit of a funk at the moment, and to, you know, go for them, go and get them. And, you know, in that first couple of minutes, I was quite worried, because, you know, they forced a couple of corners, and I thought, oh God, right, they're really up for this. And had they scored the first goal, I think we could have been in a lot of trouble. But I think as the game went on, it became clear to me that Milan had a kind of an attacking plan, but not really a defensive one. And, you know, Mkhitaryan in particular really continually exploited space down their right hand side. I guess that was planned. I guess that's something Arsenal identified beforehand. So yeah, I tend to think that Gattuso probably just sent them out there and just said, "Get into them." And at first we looked a little bit shaken by it, and I should say the San Siro was sold out. And this, I think one of the things that made me think of was that even I've been perhaps a bit guilty of dismissing this competition, not because I think Arsenal are above it. It's just up to this point I've not found it very entertaining.
The quality of it's been dog shit up to this point.
Yeah, it has. But I got inside the stadium and I was thinking, wow, AC Milan, who've won 3 European Cups, and maybe more than that. This.
I know they won me a lot of games on FIFA in the early aughts.
And this isn't a team that won them in the 50s and 60s. They won the European Cup in 2007. Most of the fans in that stadium will have seen that, and they won it in 2003. And they've had all these great players in recent memory, and yet they sold out for this. They sold all 90,000 tickets, so they were up for this. They were well up for it. Milan, perhaps a few years ahead of where we are now in terms of. They've been on the slide for a fair few years now, and they're kind of the anticipation around them, and the fans are really, really ready for them to kind of rise again. And I felt that from the team as well, that they were really, really up for this, and they really want to win the Europa League, and they really want to put the name of AC Milan back on the map. But actually, they were a little bit naive with it. It reminded me a little bit of when we played Manchester United in the Champions League semi at the Emirates a few years ago. And, we were 1-0 down from the first leg, and, everyone got in the stadium and it was really pumped, and everyone was, and the team was pumped, and they went hell for leather in the first 5 minutes, and then they were 2-0 down and it was all over. And it kind of, that's what it felt like to me that Milan were doing, that they were they feel like, they're on the cusp of doing something again, and they want to get back in the Champions League, and they're winning some games, and they've got a manager they like who's a club legend, and they've got all this new investment, although, I gather that there's issues with that as well, potentially. But basically the stage was set for them, and it wasn't set for us because, we're a team that's just coming into a down period. We've got a fairly unpopular legacy manager. We're in horrible form, particularly away from home. And basically, I feel almost like AC Milan were trying to play the narrative of the tie
instead of the team.
The game. Yeah. And actually, after 5 or 10 minutes, when we weathered that initial storm, I think Arsenal really perked up and thought, actually, there's 90,000 people here and it's AC Milan, but they're not actually that good. And look, they're giving us loads of space.
There was so much space to operate. I mean, you could almost see Mkhitaryan and Ozil and Ramsey just their eyes perked up. They were so excited for it. I mean, Mkhitaryan is a player that I've been a little nervous about given the performances recently, but he was brilliant against Everton, and we saw more of that Mkhitaryan in this game. And I'll toss this over to Paul as well in a second, but just quickly on Mkhitaryan. Was he the story of the first half for you? I mean, he really imposed himself on that left-hand side.
I thought him and Ramsey were. Actually, I thought they both were. I thought Mkhitaryan exploited that space brilliantly, and not just because he scored the goal and hit the crossbar. He really was central to everything, more so than Ozil. In fact, this was a bit of a throwback Ozil performance where I thought, what did he really do? And then I realised he set up both goals.
In Scott's section, you will realise he did stuff.
No, exactly. It was that kind of old style Ozil performance where you don't think he's done that much, but afterwards you realise he has. Whereas perhaps over the last few months or so, he's become a bit more prominent in the team, a bit more involved in a way that your eyes pick up immediately. Whereas Mkhitaryan was that guy on this occasion. It was almost like Rosicky style, it was like old style Thomas Rosicky on that left hand side, and he really intelligently exploited the space, and they gave him plenty as well. And he's creating overloads down the left with Kolasinac quite nicely. Him and Welbeck teamed up quite well as well. I think Welbeck's got a slight bias, I think, for that kind of left hand channel, and that's probably why the best performances on our team particularly in the first half, veered more towards that left-hand side. And I thought he brought a fairly decent performance out of Kolasinac as well, and that's quite promising. I absolutely think Mkhitaryan. They both scored the goals, but I thought Mkhitaryan and Ramsey were, the most eye-catching players in that first half.
Yeah, way to pick the guys who scored the goals, Tim. I usually expect you to pick out some esoteric quality of the game, but you're like, the guys who scored were pretty good. Paul, let's try to get a little more intellectual than that. What do you think of the guys that scored the goals?
They were really good.
Yeah, they were really good, dude. Yeah. Yeah,
no, I mean, Mkhitaryan actually, you can't get carried away with stats. Well, you can, but you shouldn't. But I do.
Scott will later. It's coming.
Yeah, Scott will. He did a lot of stuff. So you go through all the categories, whether it's tackles, defensive actions, etc. He was a very, very busy boy. And I do think the keys to this game, he got a little bit of space. I mean, if you think outside of Welbeck, who doesn't seem to be able to score and stuff, basically teams should just let him run because not much would happen at the end of it.
But he does pull people. He does. I mean, if they're dumb enough to follow him.
Yeah, exactly. They should let him run until he actually does something. As I said a few days ago, he's gone full Sonogo.
Having said that, when the shot that Mkhitaryan hit the crossbar, that pass from Welbeck to him, that sort of curling cross come pass on the counterattack was really sensational.
It was very good. Thanks. So anyway,
go ahead.
Mkhitaryan's basically, you're sending that team out there, you're thinking, who's going to do it today? Who's going to make something? Who's going to directly threaten the goal? It's got to be Mkhitaryan, and then secondly, Ramsey. I mean, you got Wilshere hovers around the box, and yes, on occasion, but you're basically looking for Mkhitaryan to step up, and he did. So, that was absolutely key as it panned out. And then just that partnership, Xhaka, Ramsey, where we were flirting with this general topic before the game. You come away from a game like this and you went into it thinking, we're crap. I'll take anything we can get. I'd take a score draw away at Milan.
I would have taken a 2-1 loss on our form, and I'm not trying to say that to be a dick. It's just, I mean, I am a dick, but that's, genuinely, yeah.
But I mean, our expectations, our hopes were so low, and you come away from this and, ignoring the fact that they were a bit shit and gave us just that extra yard to play. We were really good, and you go immediately into what does it mean? What can I keep from this going forward? And I'm just drawn, I watched the performance of Xhaka Ramsey a second time, and it was really, really good. And you keep projecting onto so if they had to scramble a bit more, if they were pressed a bit more, would this still work? And you look at it and you say, yeah, I think it could have. So that's the tantalizing thing about it. They really looked the part. Both of them looked very disciplined, apart from Xhaka's red mist moment with, I think it was Kessié again, where the referee was telling him to look into his eyes, and Xhaka was like fucking laser beamed into Kessié. So I thought those two were excellent, Ramsey, Xhaka. And in the first half, I thought the Wilshere piece of it worked pretty well in terms of if Ramsey went forward, Wilshere seemed to be kind of taking account of it. And, that gave me some hope. But second half, I don't know what the fuck that was. Out of possession, Jack, fell back and it made some sense. But in those kind of transition phases, I don't know what the thinking was.
He relied on the referee to bail him out quite a bit in the second half, where he was dispossessed and kind of hung a leg and got a foul call, but could have been in a lot more trouble. Just looked like his legs had gone. Just real quick before we move back to Tim, as far as Xhaka, I mean, he's come in for criticism, and I just don't think any of it is undeserved. I think he's had a very, very poor season, certainly second half of the season. This was a really good game for Xhaka. He is up there as a contender for man of the match with a lot of things he did, including awareness. There was I want to say a free kick where Xhaka dropped all the way to the far post and cut out an opportunity, and he was really switched on. I mean,
cleared it with his head.
Yeah, that's the one. Yeah, and that's the kind of thing where in another game in the league, I could have seen him maybe just going to sleep and getting beat at that post, but he was switched on, and he was making the plays that he needed to, and he was distributing well, and he was operating as that hub. I mean, is there any one simple answer you can give for why you think it worked for Xhaka tonight? Or not tonight. Well, tonight is not when the game was played, but the night the game was played.
It's funny you should say that, because I'm probably the only man equipped to handle this question. I did run this game through the Crapatron 4000.
And to make my daughter. You're the only man equipped to do that, too. We've covered that.
Yeah. I wasn't going to go there because I'm too classy.
You are. That's true. Thanks, Paul.
I don't have a great answer for this, except to say that even on closer inspection, this kind of looked like the real deal. Maybe they can take some pressing or quite a bit of pressing. Maybe it's a lot of pressing that they can't handle. This was a really good performance.
Is it real? I mean, Tim, maybe is it just as simple? Look, Xhaka was a fantastic player in the Bundesliga, and he is a good player for the Swiss. I mean, is it as simple as he's not a Premier League player, that he needs a little more space, he needs a little more time, he needs to sit deep and survey and play a more tactical game, and that Europe suits him, but he can't do it in the Premier League?
Yeah, I think there's probably a kernel of truth to that. I think whether he can do it in the Premier League to a really good standard, I'm still not sure, to be honest. Like you, I think I'd just find it really difficult to judge how good any of our players actually are at the moment, and how much it's the system and the club and blah blah blah. But yeah, definitely this pace of game absolutely suits him, because what are his best qualities? Picking the ball up off the centre half, swiveling and distributing, and listen, every player wants space and time ideally, but he seems to especially thrive on it, and he really thrived on it in this game as well. I think kind of having that extra body in midfield as well. I know so Mkhitaryan, Ozil and Wilshere were kind of part of a three behind Danny Welbeck, but again, that I think just gave him a little bit more to aim at going forwards as well. And like I said, I feel like this particular starting lineup had quite a left bias, and not just because we had quite a lot of left-footed players, but if you're Xhaka and you're picking the ball up and you're putting it onto your left foot, you're naturally inclined to look towards the left, and that's where most of the options were for him. So I think there's that to it as well. I just don't think AC Milan particularly had an off the ball plan, and therefore they probably didn't really identify that it might be good to kind of get stuck into Granit Xhaka, and it might have surprised Arsenal a bit, given, like I said, how disciplined Ramsey was in the first half. That was really that was really a double pivot for that first 45 minutes. So Arsenal might have been anticipating something a bit more in front of their back four, but yeah, that could be the case. It could be that we know he's got great qualities, and we've seen him have really good games. We've seen him have really good games in the Premier League as well.
Last season, I thought he had a perfectly acceptable season last season.
Yeah, and in I think the Carabao Cup semi-final, the first leg at Stamford Bridge against Chelsea, I thought he was absolutely outstanding, because that was a performance where we were disciplined, we played a deep block, we played largely for a 0-0, and within that kind of structure where everyone was quite organised, I thought he was outstanding. So I don't know whether it's he needs that someone beside him who's a bit of a terrier, or whether he needs to play in a league where there's a bit more time on the ball. I suspect there's a little bit of truth in both of those statements, but I mean, what we saw is that he's a really good player, and whether Arsenal don't get the best out of him or whether they can't get the best out of him, we'll probably see in the next year or so. But he definitely, AC Milan certainly gave him the perfect game for him to thrive, and he did, other than that absolutely ludicrous shot in the last minute.
Oh man, Arsene went absolutely fucking mental. And this is the problem with Xhaka, right? Like, I cannot get away from the idea that maybe he's a little bit stupid. Like, he just seems a little bit stupid. Go ahead.
It was the only time in the game that I really kind of started screaming and shouting, and him and Wilshere.
So did Arsene.
And him and Wilshere had an incredibly heated argument, like even to the point that Milan were going up the pitch and Xhaka and Wilshere were still kind of in each other's
Well, Jack
faces.
only did it to save himself the run back up the pitch, to be fair. To be fair.
I think for him, he'd made quite a good run over onto the left wing. And, I think he was a bit like, A, don't be so stupid.
Take it to
B,
the fucking corner. Yeah.
Yeah, and B, I've just run like 40 yards in hope of getting that pass. So
No, I get. All right. Well, we got to talk Aaron Ramsey for a minute here. And look, the second goal is one of those goals where everybody's going to point at Mesut Ozil and drool and be like, "Oh, look at the pass! It's incredible." Okay, it is. My feeling, the pass to Mkhitaryan for our first is actually a better pass. I have no idea how he sees him. It's like this chipped first time pass to the wing without looking. Look at the space Mesut Ozil has to pick out Aaron Ramsey. They gave him 10 yards in the final third. You can't do that. But look at what Ramsey does in that goal. Okay, he gets up the pitch. The ball is in the air behind him, so he back flick volleys it to Welbeck, right? He then continues running. He finds a pocket of space between the fullback and the center back, and he starts pointing. I want it here. I want it here. I want it here. But he holds the run, and he holds the run, and he holds the run, and he runs right at the right moment. Then he shows the composure, sits the keeper down, and slots home. That goal was exceptional, but stepping outside of that goal for a minute, Tim, if you look at the bad run we went on in December, and you look at the bad run we've been on now, it coincides with Aaron Ramsey being out of the team. Is he really the special sauce for us for this weird system, this weird amalgam of players kind of coalescing into something functional?
Yes, I think so. A lot of that is also because of the kind of the poverty of replacements we have when he's out. It's not just that we don't have someone like him; we just don't have someone really. And Jack is just a completely different type of player, and who is not the player he was. But yeah, absolutely. That kind of powerful off the ball running. Lacazette stopped scoring when Ramsey wasn't there, for example. I think I will just talk about the finish for 1 minute, because something he's clearly worked on is his finishing has been so much calmer.
He's not snatching at chances anymore. Yep.
Exactly, yeah. You look at this goal, you look at the goals against Everton. I think the one that completed his hat-trick at home to Everton, the Swansea winning goal where he passes the ball into the net, he finesses it. This one, he's just so calm, sits the goalkeeper down, and never any doubt that he's going to score. He's clearly worked on that side of his game. But I think the thing that I've really started to notice this year is that he's picking his moments to make those forward runs a little bit more. I think he did get some criticism, and I thought it wasn't misplaced that he was just running up front all the time. And actually Theo Walcott did this a little bit one point in his development, where instead of picking his time to make a run, he just constantly made that run forward and stood there waiting for the ball. And I think Ramsey did do a bit of that at times over the last few years, but this year he's really kind of beginning to get that, arriving late, arriving at the right time, waiting until all the other attackers are in position and occupying someone before he can go in. And I think what he showed again was that he could do the discipline side, that he could sit in front of the back four, that he could receive, that he could, knock passes off. We know about his attacking game, but I think also his attacking game is even more important to us at the moment, because we've kind of settled on this front three of Ozil and Mkhitaryan behind, Aubameyang / Lacazette / Welbeck. And that's quite unusual, because what you usually get in a front three is you get your main striker, and then you get a creator and a goal scorer kind of either side of him. And actually what we've got is kind of two creators, although Mkhitaryan had a really good offensive game on this occasion, and that makes Ramsey even more important. I think one of the frustrations in recent weeks has been the distance between, say, Ozil and Aubameyang. And
Ozil's definitely been coming deeper, which has never ever been his best form at Arsenal. Has never been when he's dropping deeper.
Yeah, exactly, and is not quite close enough to Aubameyang, and it's happened with Lacazette as well. They've both looked isolated at times, and that makes Ramsey even more important in terms of kind of making that run and tying up those defenders, and basically doing a bit what Theo kind of used to do. So yeah, that does make him very, very important. And basically, pretty much none of our central midfield combinations are very good at all. Xhaka and Ramsey does work in the right circumstances. It's still not brilliant, but basically any combination without Ramsey is just unsatisfactory, I think. So yeah, he and quite quietly, which is unusual for Ramsey because he tends to divide opinion. And particularly, I think another thing I want to point out, I can't remember if it directly led to the goal, but certainly about a minute before the goal, he showed some composure in his own area as well, where, you know, he's under a bit of pressure and he really calmly turns the ball over to Mustafi, I think, inside his own box. And I think that's one of the reasons a lot of fans struggle with him, because he's so composed, but he has like the wisdom to ignore the crowd. So everyone's a bit stressed when they watch their team and they just want their players to get rid of it, and don't do that back heel, and just, you know.
Try watching Manchester City for a minute. I mean, they'll drive you fucking crazy with the amount of passes they'll play in their own box.
Yeah, exactly. Whereas Ramsey's got that kind of that very, very cool head. And that can annoy people, particularly when things don't come off. But
let's do this now, because I was going to do this later, but let's do this now. I mean, the debate. I'm sorry, it sounded like you had a finishing thought there that I cut off.
No.
Okay, good, great. Perfect timing then. The debate between Ramsey and Wilshere is poisonous, and I don't understand it. There seems to be this, you are Team Ramsey or you are Team Jack, and the reason I don't understand it is a couple of things. First of all, Aaron Ramsey is a talisman for his national team. He is a key ingredient, one of the first names on team sheet for Arsenal. He's either going to get a huge contract or a big money move to a big club. He is, you know, one of the better central midfielders in the league, in the world, in my opinion. But, you know, put that aside for a second. He certainly is raising his game to even another level, I think. Jack is back from a loan to Bournemouth, where he fell out of the squad. He has started to regain a place in the Arsenal team. He is hoping to get a contract at Arsenal or maybe move down the table to a level that maybe suits him a little more. He's hoping to get back into the England team. Not to mention that Jack is a technical operator who can't really run, and Ramsey is a hard-running box-to-box finisher. I mean, why are they so closely compared, and why is the debate between them so poisonous and polarized?
Yeah, it's a weird one, isn't it? I mean,
is it just Brexit? Is it just Brexit? Is that it? Is it just a Brexit thing?
And weirdly, the two of them seem to actually get on pretty well on the pitch.
Yeah, it's a weird one. So, I mean, there are some fairly obvious reasons. They're both kind of young British players that kind of came through at the same time, playing in the same position, but in very different ways. And, you know, some of it's down to personal preference. Some people want like one type of player, others like another. So I'm certainly, you know, I've always really liked Ramsey because I like guys that are calm on the ball. I like guys that take risks, even if they don't always get it right. And that's why I like Wojciech Szczesny as well, as a player. And
Okay. You know, this isn't just you getting a chance to say whatever you want. Stick with the subject matter.
Yeah. So, you know, so I've always liked Ramsey for that reason, and kind of possibly accepted his foibles more than other people, which is absolutely fine. But I do think there's a kind of, you know, for want of a better word, identity thing going on here. And a lot of people, you know, Wilshere. So the way I boil it down is Ramsey's best work happens off the ball and Wilshere's best work happens on it.
Well said.
And so they're very, very different types of player, and they're competing for the same place. They're a similar age. They came through at a similar time. But I do think this is a fairly curious thing about social media as well, which kind of almost encourages you to kind of really take a position and go for it, you know, and identify yourself with that position. It's kind of like tribalism within tribalism, you know. It's not enough to be tribal about your team anymore. You have to be tribal about the politics.
It's like meta-tribalism.
Yeah, exactly. And obviously we've seen it with the manager down the years, although I think that's kind of all but disappearing because everyone's pretty much on the same page now. But it kind of feels like, you know, you have to take a position. It's one versus the other, and some people like identify with one and others identify with the other. And I too, I find it really curious and a bit strange. But you know, you see this a lot now. Like football, the way we view football is really moving towards individuals. Just look at any number of accounts on Twitter that are just like, that are dedicated to players as opposed to teams.
The Avi is either a picture of Ramsey holding up a trophy or Jack, telling Spurs to fuck off at the FA Cup parade.
Easy, guys, easy. I just got to say,
touche. Yeah. By the way, if you don't know, Paul's Twitter Avi is just a close-up picture of Jack's face
of his eyes. I just got to say two quick things. Wilshere's Arsenal and Ramsey's a last-minute blow-in. You know what I mean?
Yeah. I get it.
He's only been here since he was 17?
Yeah, no, I mean, Jack's been here since he was a kid, and Wilshere only got here in his teens. I see the joke you're making. But also, to be fair, Jack is an academy player. Wilshere was, Ramsey was choosing between United and Arsenal, and, there's this sense that he's not sure he wants to stick around, and Jack is, we've brought this up with Mesut Ozil, and Tim, I know that you're a big proponent of this. Like, Jack is really good at the old social media, I mean, I don't know if you saw his tweet today. We're going to be playing Watford probably around the time you listen to this podcast, and he said, let's see if we can show some cojones or whatever, like with a bunch of eye emojis in relation to Troy Deeney's comment.
Fans,
go ahead.
Fans identify with him. He's a bit rough and ready. Likes to go out, likes to smoke. He comes from Hertfordshire. I know he didn't grow up as an Arsenal fan.
He's a throwback to 80s football in some respects, right?
Yeah. And when we go 2-0 down, he gets all frustrated and kicks people. And whereas Ramsey is a slightly blander character.
Looks like a model.
Likes rhino.
Manicured hair.
Likes rhinos and stuff like that. And people don't really don't identify with that quite as much. But I mean, so the point I was going to make as well, like, this happens inter club as well, so you always get people like not arguing about Arsenal and Liverpool anymore. It's like Ozil and Coutinho. Every time Coutinho makes an assist, you get like this Liverpool fan account going, oh, look at this, he's much better than Ozil. And then like Ozil will do like a pre-assist or a back heel or something, and people will be like, oh, I'd like to see Coutinho do that. Like, it's really getting geared towards individuals now. And so I think there's a lot of these things kind of playing into it. Yeah.
Tim, I know you hate the transfer window, but Coutinho was transferred to Barcelona. No, your point is spot on. Look, I want to get your thoughts on Danny in a minute, but let's let Scott jump in, give us the statistics that show us why all of our opinions are correct, and then we'll come back. We'll talk Danny, we'll talk defense, we'll talk about where the tie stands, and then we'll put this out into the world for no one to listen to it because Watford will play already. We'll be back in just a second.
This is our last goodbye. I hate to feel the love between us now, but it's over. Just hear this and then I'll go. You gave me.
It's time to get downright statsy, and here to do it is the statastic man himself, Scott. You can find him on Twitter at @O_that_crab. Read his stuff on theshortfuse.com and crabstats.blogspot.com. But most importantly, and I emphasize this, find his stuff on this podcast. That's really what we want you to do. Scott, hello.
Hello. This might be my favorite place that I show up.
It might be. It might not be. I mean, who can say? What's the expected excitement for this segment?
Actually, it's almost as high as Aaron Ramsey's open goal chance. So,
nice.
0.88.
Well, is that what it was? 0.88. Is that the highest chance you've logged this season?
That's just about, I'd have to go back and look. But, I mean, it's one of those things. I'm sure if I went back and threw in the defensive pressure and the no people between there, it would get, pretty close to 1, because that's probably about as close as of a 1 chance as you can get.
Yeah. I mean, I loved every minute of it, too. But so, hey, I'm going to throw a stats curveball at you. What was the expected Spursiness of their crash out?
Oh, 100%.
It was a 1. 1.0 expected Spurs.
I loved every second of that one.
I almost want to dive into that more than this, but we did win a game. We did win a game at the San Siro. We did win a game convincingly with a clean sheet. All of the things that we were told could not happen, and certainly I believe could not happen. So let's dig into the statistical reasons why it did happen. And I know that Mesut Ozil is going to jump off the paper. He always does. But other than Mesut Ozil, who jumps off the paper for you?
I thought Mkhitaryan had a really good game. I know I've been kind of banging on him a little bit the last couple times we talked, giving the ball away too much and not really having his stuff come off. But this game, I thought he was actually probably the best player on the pitch for Arsenal. So that was really positive and exciting to see for me.
What are some of the numbers that bear that out?
So he was, led the Arsenal in shots with 3, scored the one really good goal, had another one, a big chance that he get off the post. 83% passing, 81% in the final third, led Arsenal in final third attempts and completions. Created 2 additional chances. One of them was a big chance. And then it was 5 of 9 on dribbling, leading Arsenal. And, even threw in 3 tackles and an interception. So, yeah, just an overall good game.
Yeah, we'll take it. I mean, I was thrilled to see that performance, and I think, the one thing we know about Arsenal is if you don't put pressure on us in midfield, if you let us have space, that's where those players can kill you. I said I didn't want to hear about Mesut Ozil, but who am I kidding? His assist was beautiful. I guess, does the Mkhitaryan goal get an Ozil assist as well?
It does, yes.
So he assists both goals quite brilliantly. I thought his vision to find Mkhitaryan on the first, maybe not getting as much attention as it should because of his laser pointer pass to Ramsey for the second, but it was equally excellent. How about the rest of his day? PPVA, passing, final third, all that. Was he equally exceptional?
Yeah, so he had a good game, maybe not quite to his lofty standards. So I had him, unsurprisingly leading the team and overall in passing value added. His overall offensive value added was just below a couple of players. So Mkhitaryan I had leading the team, Aaron Ramsey second, and then I think Mesut Ozil was their third. Actually, no, Granit Xhaka is just ahead of him. So yeah, overall a very good game. He also he came out early, got a nice substitute to rest for the weekend, I guess. Who knows?
I would hope that he does not play at the weekend. I would hope that nobody plays at the weekend. In fact, I'll take a 3-0 forfeit as the Premier League has been canceled for the rest of the season. Or we could just play Aubameyang by himself and see what he can do. He would definitely get service if he was the only Arsenal player, right?
That's true. Yeah, a lot of touches.
So there you go. As far as Xhaka, you brought him up. I thought this was one of his better games, and he was deployed a little deeper. And I think when he does sit a little deeper, that's when we see more from him in terms of his line-breaking passing and his vision distribution. I mean, he's always going to be a little limited defensively and in terms of his mobility, but I thought this was a better game. Do his numbers jump out at you as being an improvement from what we've seen of him lately?
Yeah, definitely. So he actually was able to take up a little bit of the Ozil role that he normally fills in the connecting the midfield to the final third. So he actually led Arsenal in the final third entries. So he was 9 of 11 on those, which is really good. So I thought that he actually did a great job of looking to be kind of between the lines, so between the forwards, the Milan forwards and their midfielders. So that deeper spot where he was able to kind of quarterback things. And he really seemed to be able to pick out the passes. He was 4 of 4 in his long passes, completed almost all of his passes in the midfield and defensive third. So that's just really key for him, is to get those ones where he can get his momentum and his rhythm going and just completing, moving the ball around, recirculating it. So yeah, I thought Xhaka, really had a good game, and I was very happy to see that. So to me, he's kind of put together a couple of good games in a row. If as long as you don't pay attention to the Manchester City one, which maybe shouldn't. But yeah, so I'm happy to see him getting going. I think he's an important part of the Arsenal midfield.
Yeah, it just really seemed like we had the space to operate, and that's something that you just don't get in the Premier League, and more teams are catching on to not giving us that space. I mean, I know it sounds obvious, but sitting off of us gives us a chance to play the football we like to play. I don't suppose, I didn't ask you this up front, so I'm not guessing that you would have it, but is there any way to sort of extrapolate the data on passes per defensive action in a game like this and kind of get a sense of how lax Milan's pressure was?
Yeah, so I do have that. So Milan
awesome.
had 33 defense actions. Arsenal had 459 passes.
So the simple math I'll do in my head right now is
7
passes per defensive action. So that would actually indicate that they were kind of pressy, wouldn't it?
Oh, I'm sorry, 13.
13. I was going to say it didn't say.
There we go.
Yeah, okay. So, I mean, what does that say? I mean, does that suggest that they were pressing more than maybe you're giving them credit for? Is that a pretty average number?
It's not a huge number. We can break it down by which sections they were in. Let me just pull these over.
Absolutely, because I think, the narrative is if you press Arsenal, they can't live with it, and if you give them space, they can. Well, certainly that's the narrative I'm creating, and I think it certainly looked to me like we had more space. I mean, the second goal is a clear example of all that space. Mesut Ozil had 10 clear yards to stand there on the ball, look for Ramsey's run, and pick the pass, something that we haven't been given the opportunity to do in the Premier League. I think also you could make the argument that there was a period where they pressed us a little more midway through the second half, where they started to come into the game more, and I think it was sort of the scariest part of the game for us, but certainly not a tactic they used early.
Yeah, so they ended up having 9 defensive actions per pass in the middle third. 9
passes per defensive action.
Yeah, so I mean, that's not a huge press. So I mean, it's not a great one either. So I mean, I think it kind of bears out that Arsenal had room to operate in there. Really, the only person that seemed to be drawing defenses to him was Jack Wilshere, who I thought absolutely had a bad game.
All right, so let's talk about that. Now, I think one of the things that's sort of starting to happen, unfortunately, is anytime you criticize Jack Wilshere, there is a section of the support that seems to take it more personally than maybe with respect to other players. I understand that he's an academy kid. You know, he's English. He's someone who went through a hard time in his career with injuries, and there's a lot of people that have a lot of emotional investment in wanting to see him get it back, so to speak. You know, that bright, enthusiastic optimism for him that we saw when he was dominating that Barcelona midfield so many years ago. But while he had been doing well earlier in the season, it looks like he's starting to struggle a little bit with his physical level. And for me, as this game wore on, it was just clear that he was off the pace. I know you've posted on Twitter that he turned it over a lot, and I want you to sort of bring up those numbers, but I'm also curious if you have any kind of breakdown by first and second half. Was he struggling throughout the game, or did his struggles sort of increase as his energy levels dipped?
So I noticed that the biggest ones were in the middle part of the game, where he seemed to really kind of lose his focus. So his worst one was right before halftime. And then he had a couple of other ones that were in that 50 to 70 minute range, where he had some bad ones right there in the middle of the park where he gave the ball away.
How many times did he give it away overall?
So 6 times total. So that's dispossessed or a bad touch. So I'm not counting bad passes here, because to me those ones aren't the worst of his issues.
But that led the team, presumably?
It did, yes.
Mm-hmm. And yeah, I mean, it also looked to me like he was just struggling with his mobility. At one point, I noticed Kessie just kind of ran right by him like he was a dribbling cone. So
and the other thing is, to me, when he was playing well earlier in the season, and what I thought was quite encouraging was that he seemed to be moving the ball quicker and not dwelling on the ball. And the other thing that he was seeming to do in this game, which was a little bit frustrating to see, was he was looking to almost draw a foul like a defender does in basketball, looking for like a charge so you can flop at the littlest bit of contact. And, you know, the referee was really not buying that.
He did get one of those calls in a really important moment where the ball had gotten away from him in midfield and they had a counter, and someone was just kind of pressing him from behind and he went down. He got the call. And that would have been really dangerous. But you're right, there were a lot of times the ref just kind of waved at him to get up. And in fact, the referee was kind of calling the game that way the whole game.
Yeah, so I mean, and that seems to be the last couple times he's played. He's definitely been inviting the pressure a little bit more, trying to beat somebody with the dribble instead of, you know, trusting himself to be able to pass through it. And it also makes me worried that he's, you know, maybe it's a mental thing where he feels like he's feeling stronger, so he feels like he can do it. But to me, it almost makes him look worse. And there was a couple of those times where, he did get the ball taken off him, and Milan had a really good chance to counter, and it was really only because of their ineptitude and, one really good chime of Callum Chambers defending that really bailed Arsenal out in both of those situations. Yeah,
I mean, it's a shame to have to point out any negative on a great night like that, but I think it was pretty glaring, and it was certainly surprising when his number didn't go up on the board and Ozil came off instead. I thought that was really surprising. Anyone else sort of worth digging into? I guess the real question would be Danny Welbeck, and he had some sort of typical Danny moments where he struggled to put his feet into the right positions to stand or run or kick a ball. But I also thought, while he had some sort of typically uncoordinated Danny moments, his running was actually pretty useful, and he did have that one pass was it to Mkhitaryan when Mkhitaryan hit the crossbar?
I think it was.
Yeah, and it was a really, really nice curled ball on a counterattack, one of our best flowing moves of the game. I mean, is there anything you can salvage from the data from Danny's performance that make it maybe less of a target for comedy?
Yeah, so I mean, he actually ended up leading Arsenal in XG chain because I think he was involved in. Well, he was definitely involved in the Mkhitaryan goal because or the assist key pass because he was the one that got that one through the defense on the counterattack, and then I think he was also involved in the Aaron Ramsey chance.
Didn't he give the ball to Ozil? Ramsey flicks it to Welbeck, and Welbeck carries it a little bit to the center and then gives it to Ozil.
That's good memory. So yeah, I mean, he actually did seem to connect well with the rest of his teammates. He ended up being the fifth highest in my offensive value added stat. So I mean, it was definitely a good day for him in all of the things except for shooting,
kicking a football. Yeah, mm-hmm.
Exactly. So I mean, that's very typical. Danny Welbeck does everything well except for the thing that you want your center forward to be best at.
Yeah, I mean, it's tough, right? Because it is his hard running that I think really helps disrupt defenses, pulls them out of position, creates space and openings. But you can't just have hard running. You have to have some end product, some ability to kick the ball towards the goal. There was the one chance where he kind of got away down the left and he put it on his right foot and opened his body and just didn't have the conviction with the finish. You know what I'm talking about? He tried to, I guess, curl it, but he just passed it to the keeper.
Exactly. And well, I think one of the things that actually allows the team to function a little bit better is when Aaron Ramsey is in the team, because Aaron Ramsey is going to have those late runs in the box where he is going to be able to get shots off. And it looks like Mkhitaryan is also taking up that role of being able to get shots off. So it kind of makes up a little bit for Welbeck's lack of shooting well. So I thought the team actually seemed to play pretty well with the balance between the teams. But yeah, I would much rather have seen a Aubameyang or a Lacazette up there on top.
And what was the XG for the match overall?
So overall, Arsenal ended up with
and if you have it, sorry, go ahead.
2.15 for Arsenal, 1.51 for Milan.
And of that 2.15, 0.88 came on the second goal.
That's right. Yeah, almost all of it came in the first 50 minutes or so. And then they had like nothing until they had a couple of bad shots at the very end of the game.
Yeah, well, and there's nothing wrong with that when you have two away goals and a two-legged tie. Nothing wrong with controlling it a little bit. So, Scott, we'll look forward to talking to you maybe after Watford, definitely after the second leg. Any final thoughts for the second leg? You feeling pretty good about it from here?
Yeah, I think Arsenal put themselves in a pretty good spot. So as long as they don't totally shut down like they did against Ostersunds, they should be in a good spot to get to the quarterfinals.
Awesome. All right. Well, Scott's on Twitter at O_that_crab. You can hear his fine work on this very podcast, but also read it on theshortfuse.com and crabstats.blogspot.com. And remember, Scott hates Jack Wilshere, and if you want to send abuse, send it to him on Twitter. That's where he prefers it. Scott, thank you.
Aaron Ramsey for life.
One love. Okay, we'll talk to you after the next one.
Must I dream and always see your face? Why can't we overcome this war? Baby, maybe it's just because I didn't know you.
Okay, so there you have it. Those are the statistics that go with the game. And I think Scott posted some stuff on Twitter about Jack's giveaways, and I think those giveaways, the point he made is everyone kind of killed Alexis for the giveaways that were a routine part of his performances, but that Jack did them in much more dangerous areas, which is something to keep an eye on. It's one thing to give the ball away in the left wing, final third left wing, it's another thing to give it away in the center of the pitch. But a player who I think is really hard to evaluate and is a really important part of our Europa League situation right now, at least until Lacazette comes back, is Danny Welbeck. And Paul, this is a tough game for Danny because on the one hand, he had those comedy moments where he couldn't use his feet for running or kicking. There was the shot towards the end of the game where he was running and he tripped himself trying to shoot and then looked back like his foot had been stepped on, but clearly it hadn't. And yet, he had some really good counterattacking opportunities. He and Mkhitaryan linked up well. He had the one where he passed it kind of to the keeper, which was maybe not enough conviction in the finish. He had the pass to Mkhitaryan where Mkhitaryan hit the bar, and his running seemed to really trouble Milan, that they had a hard time keeping track of him. So how do you evaluate this performance? And was the impact of his running enough to contemplate sticking with him when Lacazette is ready, or is he simply not giving you enough end product to even countenance that?
Yeah, I don't think he's a bit worrying at the moment. The only thing you can say is this is probably the poorest Danny Welbeck we've seen at the club. And maybe it's largely a factor of coming back from the injury. This was a big one, and maybe we're underestimating how big it was. It really looks like he's not as fast as he was. He's lost confidence, and he certainly lost the finishing touch, whatever he'd had before.
He's a lot more Sonogo now than he used to be, right? He was always Sonogo-ian, but now he's just kind of Sonogo. Yeah,
he's full Sonogo. That said, if the other team doesn't realize he can't hurt them, he can hurt them. And,
by pulling them out of position, you mean?
Yeah, you reeled off a few things. But the Ramsey goal, I'm just watching it on the old Arsenalist.com.
He's the one who cuts in and gives it to Ozil.
Yeah, good take, knocks it back to Ozil. But the other thing is, Ramsey rounds the keeper, but he also has the square ball to Welbeck, which he doesn't need to take. But, that's probably the best look Welbeck had all game. He's right there if the keeper kind of cuts the angle for Ramsey's shot.
What's kind of unusual, he was involved, a lot of the really good flowing attacking moves, he was involved in the build-up, and that, I think you have to give him credit for that.
Yeah, and maybe he also gained a little bit in that without the same kind of pressing and pressure and tightness of the defensive line, he too had a little bit more room. But he could come out of this game with a whole bunch of confidence he didn't come into it with, and it could be a big game for him. So, and he certainly play the next tie against Milan, and then Lacazette may be back-ish.
Would you consider playing them together? I mean, getting the work and the running and the chaos that he provides with Lacazette's smoother, more controlled performance so that you still have that burst. I mean, we are not a team that has pace, and the one thing I will say that you see with Danny on the pitch is someone that can run beyond the defense hurts defenses, scares defenses. And there is a value to having that on the pitch, and we have no one who can do that in the Europa League apart from him.
Yeah, I definitely think there's a value of playing the two of them up front. I think, both of them have had some struggles to be impactful on their own, where they've looked and felt isolated, and maybe there's a combo of the two of them, with Danny maybe coming a little bit from the left, his preferred side, but really playing as a glorified second striker. It means the other guy's moving around a little bit. Maybe we drop Iwobi, but and drop Jack out of this scenario.
I think you'd have to drop Jack, but see, I'd almost have Danny as the striker with Lacazette just off of him and let Danny clear out that space with his running, to create some space at the edge of the box for Lacazette. Yeah. I mean, I know, Tim, you wrote about playing Aubameyang and Lacazette together. Could a Welbeck-Lacazette combination be a poor man's version of that?
Yeah, I think so. They actually combined really well earlier this season when Welbeck was in good scoring form. And
who can remember that? How can you remember
was in good scoring form. So if you look at the first game of the season against Leicester, they both scored in the first half. I think the second home game against Bournemouth, they both scored, and they were kind of involved in each other's goals. I think Lacazette is one of those players. I think you're right. I think he can either play, if you put him in a front two, he can either play that almost slightly withdrawn number 10 role, or he can play as the number 9. He's quite versatile in that respect. But he's struggled so far, completely on his own, So I actually think Welbeck and Lacazette could work really well. And you could just say, look, one of you just kind of stay in the number 9 role and the other one buzz around behind and try and get close to your strike partner. And actually, I think either one of them could do either one of those roles. So there's perhaps some kind of grounds for experimentation there. But yeah, I definitely think that we could do that. I think it's really worth a try. And I think given the fact that our league games at this point are pretty much meaningless.
They're great training exercises.
Well, that's one of the things I'd try. And I was thinking earlier as well, if Ospina is going to be the Europa League keeper, we should just keep him in the Premier League from now on. I personally still slightly prefer Cech, but if Ospina's the cup goalkeeper, this entire season is riding, and probably the manager's future is riding on this competition. If he's decided that Ospina's his cup goalkeeper and that's it, stick him in the Premier League as well. Let him get a really good run of games with those defenders. Don't take him in and out at this stage. It's not like Cech's playing brilliantly anyway. and he probably needs replacing in the summer when they're both going to go. So you know what, to hell with it. Just play Ospina in the Premier League as well. And I kind of think that with this, I think that actually some kind of maybe slightly obscure strike partnership could really work. Arsenal have kind of had these, like Eduardo and Adebayor was a fairly offbeat strike partnership-ish. Walcott and Giroud at one stage was, a bit like a strike partnership. I think there's a little bit of space in that final third that I don't think we're filling at the moment. I think there is too much of a gap between, well, like I said earlier, Ozil and Aubameyang. Whether Mkhitaryan can start to fill that gap a little bit, as he kind of did against AC Milan, that would be a very positive development. But otherwise, I think there's just a little bit of a hole almost between those two areas of the pitch. And yeah, I'd certainly give it a try. And I think Welbeck is one of those strikers who I tweeted the other week that he reminded me of Emil Heskey, and I meant it as a compliment. Mm-hmm. Because I used to like Emil Heskey, and it was I never
so
found...
you were the guy.
yeah, I was the guy. And I never found it a big coincidence that the likes of Wayne Rooney, Michael Owen, Robbie Fowler all really liked playing with him. And there was a reason for that, because he was a great strike partner. He was great at doing the dirty work, the running no one else wanted to do, going up for the headers and chesting the ball down, and basically just, doing all the kind of the spade work for another striker. And I think Danny Welbeck could really do that. I think Arsenal have had a few forwards over the since Van Persie left, who I think, you know what, you'd be much better in a front two. And I think Welbeck, basically, he's caught a little bit out of time, because you get these strikers sometimes, a bit like Michael Owen towards the end of his career, where you think, yeah, you've just gone out of fashion a little bit, because the fashion is for lone strikers now, and you need a strike partner. And so you see some of these strikers kind of go out of fashion because they need someone to do their dirty work. Well, Welbeck's like the other side of that conundrum, I think. Yeah, you're the guy who needs to do the dirty work for someone. So I think Welbeck would be an excellent strike partner in that Emil Heskey kind of way. He wouldn't score you many goals, but he would probably help his strike partner score 5 or 6 more.
Yeah,
and he did have one of those games of hunting and harrying and chasing back, and this was a very Heskey game.
Yeah, and just to go to your point earlier, about that ball through for Mkhitaryan. I said at the time, I was like, isn't it amazing? He goes through one-on-one with the goalkeeper, and he puts it like straight at his chest. But then, like, presented with this almost impossible eye of the needle pass, he manages it. Yeah, like because it's 30 yards from goal and it's not a shot. He manages it no problem. It's just it must be a psychological thing.
Well, I mean, he kicks his own feet with a shot on goal from 18. I mean, it's clearly a psychological thing. I mean, as much as we joke that he doesn't know how to use his feet, I'm sure he knows how to use his feet. I mean, Paul, unless you have more to add on Danny, I'd like to come on to the important stuff, which is the defending. That's what everybody pays their money for this podcast for. So I'm torn. I thought Koscielny had a great game in the big crisis moments. I thought Mustafi really had his best game in a while. There were good signs from Kolasinac. Unfortunately, he had to come off, but they had openings. Chambers gave the ball away in the corner early. Chambers gave the ball away a few times. I thought he did well going forward, not so well coming back. They had Suso had a chance from the right channel, 8 yards out, blazed over. They had an easy volley attempt from the penalty spot that they went 20 yards over the net, the header that they just missed on the corner. Was this a better defensive effort than what we've seen, or was this a defensive effort similar to what we've seen where we got away with it?
It was definitely a better defensive effort. But
was it?
Yeah.
Was it?
Yeah.
If I say it in a high-pitched enough voice, will you change it? Was it?
Yeah. Because, but it may be one and the same. The fabric of the centre-back pairing wasn't really torn apart, and the two central midfielders provided adequate cover so that the centre held. And this was one game in which the centre was generally solid for our defence. But against a better team, you could start hearing that the fabric rent in twain, I think. So I think it's not that everything has changed. It's just until you tear the fabric, it's not torn. I think right down the middle of the team, we were very solid. But on where they didn't really hurt us enough was the gaps between the centre backs and the full backs. I didn't think Kolasinac was particularly good going backwards. I agree with that. Yeah, he was very, very good going forwards. He was very much part of our secret sauce. But going backwards, I mean, you put Maitland-Niles on, and it was night and day in terms of how we buttoned up that side of the pitch. And I think the other vulnerability was obviously between Chambers and Mustafi. There was a nice pocket there of confusion and chaos, which they never really took. Their quality in the final third was very, very poor in this game because they got themselves into positions to create chances. It was the final ball was never quite right for them. But
it's a warning. It's certainly a warning for the second leg. I mean, we don't want them to have those positions in the second leg.
No, but I do come out of this game thinking, if we play that 4 in the centre, the 2 CMs and the 2 centre backs against Milan at home, we'll be okay.
Okay. Well, then give me your quick appraisal of the next leg. What do you think?
I haven't really given it any thought. That's as far as I've got. I can't see us. I mean, what are our? I guess the question is, what players are coming in that we don't have right now? Monreal sounds like he might be back.
Bellerin. Maybe not.
Bellerin his inflamed knee will hopefully be nicely rested and iced. So we could have 2 much better fullbacks. And you leave kind of everything else the same. Do
you stick or twist? Do you go for it? Do you try to play the same way? I mean, do you try to get goals and know that, just sitting and having them come on to you? I mean, you could benefit from that. You say, we'll play on the counter. How do you approach it?
I thought this was the game that we might have been a bit more tactical, bit more cynical in terms of the risk-reward thing, but it didn't turn out that way. I think at the Emirates, you play an attacking game. You don't go nuts. You don't go crazy. You keep the basics in mind. But I think if you tell Xhaka and Ramsey to play a balanced game and to keep the spaces fairly close until things are well in hand, I think you play a very similar approach to this game.
Yeah, I agree with that. Tim, as far as the defensive effort, what did you make of it? Luck or good?
Bit of both. Largely, well, it's a low bar, but much better than what we've been seeing lately. And we possibly, I think, got a bit lucky with a penalty call on Ospina in the first half. And what's quite interesting about when you're watching in the San Siro is the away end. When you're playing AC Milan, the away end is like way up in the gods, kind of back of the third tier stuff, and it's a really big pitch at the San Siro as well. So in some ways it gives you a really good appreciation of the spacing. In another way, I think it kind of warps it, because you've got this like literal bird's eye view of one of the bigger playing surfaces in Europe. So it can look like there's lots and lots of space, like lots more than usual. And some of that's just a kind of trick of perspective, but some of it, can be quite worrying as well. I completely agree with what Paul said. I think somewhere we've been weak all season is kind of between the fullbacks and the centre halves, and they really didn't do enough to try and to really try and expose that. And the one time they really did was for that penalty shout when Ospina came out, and for my money didn't get the ball and impeded the player. But yeah, we got away with that one. And Milan have a fairly good striker called Adrian Silva, Portuguese striker, who's kind of tends to be a bit better at running the channels, but they left him on the bench. And I think they looked a little bit more dangerous when they brought him on. I think largely because they had 2 up front as well. So obviously you're going to look a bit more dangerous.
Well, we were also playing with 10 men towards the end, because I couldn't believe the manager left Jack on the pitch. I mean, I'm not trying to pick on him, but he was done. He was clearly done. We needed El Neni or Iwobi for him, someone to give us that running.
And I think he probably would have come off had it not been for Chambers getting cramp at the end. So we kind of had to throw El Neni on at right back. But So I felt that, like, defensively we were quite a bit better, and in the second half I thought, obviously the whole team kind of made a decision, whether it was a decision or whether it was just because they're low on confidence and they wanted to see it out, to kind of just stay in that deep block. And again, like I say, the space can be deceptive, but I really thought we should have won this by more. On the pattern of the game, actually, I think we had some really good chances in the first half, but not only that, Milan left a lot of space in the second half for the counter-attack. And whether we could have had 4 or 5, Tim, I agree with you, but they could have had 2, right? So, I mean, I'll take 2-0 over, well, I don't know if I would, but I was going to say it could have been 4-2 just as easily. Yeah. Do you know?
And man, did we need a clean sheet?
Yeah, good point.
Yeah. I had this discussion yesterday, actually, exactly that. I said, I'd rather have 2-0, even maybe than 4-1, just because I think you're right. The clean sheet was so important, particularly going forward, and I feel like that will have a lot of extra value outside the confines of this game and this tie.
Not that we have anything to play for outside the confines of this game and this tie. Yeah.
No. But like for the upcoming league games and hopefully for kind of future rounds, provided we get through this, that I think that was really, really important. So I understand why the team was a little bit kind of inhibited in the second half and perhaps didn't take the opportunity to really counter-attack. And let's face it, if they'd kind of tried to do that and ended up conceding a goal, we'd all be raging about how stupid they are and how they don't have any in-game management or intelligence.
You mean like if, for example, our midfielder shot from 25 yards out under no pressure in stoppage time? Yeah, that would have been outrageous. So let's close with just your thoughts on the second leg, how you'd approach it and what you expect.
I would approach it exactly the same way as this one. I thought we did kind of play on the break in this game, and I think we had the players to do it. I do think that Welbeck is a much better striker on the counter-attack than he is when you're really taking the game to someone. We all know Ozil's brilliant on the counter. We all know Ramsey can do it on the counter. I think Mkhitaryan as well looks like that kind of player who looks like he can enjoy himself on the break. So I'd do that again. To be honest, I would. I completely endorse what Paul said about the midfield too, telling them to perhaps rein it in a little bit. But then just really let that kind of front four really kind of have at it when we don't have the ball. So we almost have like 2 different teams. We have like the back 6 and the front 4. And then you've got Ramsey kind of creating that bridge between the two when we kind of go forward. So that's the way I would try to play it. And if we can score the first goal, then I think we should be okay. But I don't think we should underestimate Milan too much.
Well, let's not do what we did against Ostersund, for example.
Exactly.
That would be the wrong approach.
If Milan score, let's not. This game would have been great for our confidence, but it's not going to be entirely repaired yet. So, if Milan go 1-0 up, pretty much at any point in the game, it's going to feel quite scary. So, and that's perfectly possible. So, job not done by a long chalk.
All right. Well, I think that's a good place to leave it. Tim's on Twitter at Stilberto. Thanks, Tim.
Pleasure.
Paul's on Twitter at Paz in My Pants. Thanks, Paz.
Woo!
Not going to do the usual outro here because we've got a bonus section coming up. So we'll go to the bonus section. Then you'll hear the whole Arsenal 10, Watford 0, dull, horrible crap. But thank you for listening to us. Give us a 5-star review. Leave us a nice review on iTunes or wherever you catch this podcast. And we'll be back after the Watford game to cover what is another meaningless Premier League fixture and maybe a little more in-depth look forward to the second leg against Milan. So good to get a win. We'll come up with the bonus section and say goodbye.
Did you say, no, this can't happen to me? Or did you rush to the phone to call? Was our voice unkind in the back of your mind? Saying, babe.
So on the last podcast, we had a bonus section. It was just Paul. But we have a bonus section on this pod, and it's Clive. Clive can be found on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Hello, Clive.
Hello.
You lose to Brighton, you get Paul as a bonus. You beat AC Milan at the San Siro, you get Clive as a bonus. That's why you want to win the big European nights. And speaking of big European nights, how thoroughly did you enjoy ours?
It was nice to win, wasn't it? It's a lovely feeling. I tell you what, I sometimes look at turning points And sometimes
if you say turned a corner, I will kill you through the microphone.
Well, you know what? I actually think Spurs-Juventus was our turning point, because I've forgotten how happy I felt when I see good football, right? And seeing Spurs in Juventus in a good match and Spurs not win sort of made me really positive for the next day. And that's terrible.
Took the pressure off, man. I mean, if they had gotten through past Juventus, all of a sudden the narrative is written, right? The power shift.
Yeah, it goes to show you that sometimes, it's not just your own results, but the rest of the top six are so positive. Everyone's moving forward, and we're the one team in the top six that's massively underperforming. And to see someone else just have a little trip, it sort of made me feel positive. And I think the Spurs game was my turning point of the season so far. Yeah,
I mean, look, can't smile without you, right? Schadenfreude. It's what the football's all about. So as far as this game, I think there are two contrasting performances we can talk about a little bit, because in the wake of the game, it seems to be a big talking point. And Clive, for the life of me, I cannot get over the degree of debate and argument that surrounds Jack Wilshere versus Aaron Ramsey. It is the weirdest thing. These players are never evaluated individually. They are always evaluated as a pair. The people that seem to like Jack Wilshere seem to not like Aaron Ramsey, and vice versa, despite the fact that it's quite clear that they do not bear any resemblance to one another in playing style or what they do on the pitch. And yet here we are again debating it. So I thought it was a bit of a struggle for Jack. He gave the ball away quite a bit, as we covered in Scott's section. And obviously Ramsey shined with the way he scored his goal. I thought every bit of that goal was impressive. Ramsey's not really your cuppa, and Jack is kind of your guy. So I'm curious how you absorbed this match, what your feelings are in terms of their contrasting performances.
Okay, well, I sometimes look at Jack and Ramsey as almost like Lampard and Gerrard, right? Both good players.
They never played for the same club. I realize it was an England thing. Yeah, okay, go ahead.
Yeah, both good players, right? But both slightly different in their styles, and both seen as the primary player for the people that like them. But the situation we have is that potentially it's in the same club, right? So the way I view it, the both of them, right? I see them almost. I said it before. I see them as one player. I don't think we have centre midfielders that are the right quality to be a league-winning team, and I include all of them in that boat. Right at the moment, I've said it before, Elliot, we have a lot of good players that do good things sometimes. And when you speak to a sort of Wilshere fan, they pick out moments. When you speak to someone that really rates Ramsey, they pick out moments, the cup final winning goals. I look at it and I think, well, you know what? Those moments, those spectacular moments, are almost indicative of what we've become. And we've become a cup team now. And I always look at things and I judge Arsenal as a league challenging team, and we are now.
I've got bad news for you.
Yeah, but and that's where I take my judgments from. So when I talk about Ramsey and I talk about Wilshere, the first thing I always talk about is style, which one you like from a style perspective. And I looked at the game yesterday and I thought they rotated quite well into the 10 and out of the 10. And when Jack was caught deeper, Ramsey pushed up and vice versa. I quite like that, actually. I like Ramsey higher, but if he's higher all the time, I think he gets connected to. If he's deeper, he then appears in space and he's harder to track. And his goal was a classic example. If you watch the film, Jack was deeper and Ramsey pointed at him, you stay there for a minute. And he hung right, flicked it inside, spun around the corner. He was left free for quite a while, a lot longer than he would have been in the Premiership, and Ozil found him. And what I loved about the goal was the way he made sure he sort of looked at it and said, "This is an important moment. I'm not going to try and slide it around a big goalkeeper who might get a foot on it. I'm going to sit him. I'm going to go around him, and I'm going to score because of the way goal in Europe means something."
Well, composure in front of goal has been the criticism of him, right? He's always been good at getting into position for chances, but he doesn't always finish them at a high rate. And so to have the composure to sit the keeper down, round him, and slot it in, I thought that was very impressive.
Yeah, I thought it's impressive. I think his composure comes from snapshots and shooting. I think he doesn't always set himself correctly. He likes to do things spectacular. And shooting early is obviously great because keepers are not set, but shooting early is obviously risky, right? So you've got to get your body right, body shape right, and you've got to time your arrival right. This one, the touch was great, sat him down great. Just what you want. What I like to see are players that seize the moment and say, this is important, I must take care. And he did that, and I really, really like that. When I look at the game, when I look at the two of the centre mids, I just feel, I ask myself the question, I'll ask you the question, do you think they are top-level league-winning quality?
No, they're not, and no one cares about my opinion, but I'm going to give it since you asked. No, they're not. I think the problem is, though, look, I think to be a competitive team in England, you need greater physicality than we have in midfield. I think to be a competitive team in Europe, you need greater technical quality than we have in midfield. If you see the distinction that I'm drawing, we don't have the running to boss a midfield in England. I realize that's not how City does it right now, but by and large, I think you need someone who has a little bit of physicality and athleticism in midfield for the Premier League. And I think in Europe, you need those technical leaders. I thought what made this game work for us in some respects is that Xhaka did kind of his best Pirlo impression to some extent. You know, he sat deep, he surveyed the pitch, he distributed well, he was safe with the ball, and a lot of that was because of the space he was given. For me, though, Clive, and I want to get your take on this part of Jack's game, look, Jack still has a feel for the little flicks and the little passes and the little dagger balls, and he has that. He has that eye. I think he reads the game really well with the ball at his feet. He doesn't read the game particularly well defensively, but what's really worrying is just physically the running. He doesn't have the legs anymore, and I thought this was the biggest example of a glaring problem for him in this game. He could not run. He struggled early, but by the middle part of the game, by 45 to 60, 70 minutes, he was just getting run by Kessie at one point, ran right by him like he was standing still. He got taken off the ball 6 different times. He struggled to keep up with these players going up and down the pitch. And I mean, my question for you is, does he have it physically to be able to play in central midfield anymore?
I went to Liverpool game at the Emirates just before Christmas, and Liverpool are a hard-running team, and he was our hardest-running centre midfielder on the day, without a doubt. So I've seen it. Do I trust it on a week-to-week basis? No, I don't. Back to being a cup team. Can we produce it 3 times a week, every week to win the league? No,
but is it that he has more games in his legs now? I mean, you know, by December he was just coming back into the team. Now he's been in the team for 2 or 3 months, and we're seeing what his legs have in him. It's not enough.
I don't think he's got the rhythm back from the illness and after Christmas. Mm-hmm. He hasn't got back to top rhythm. But also, Elliot, his position has changed. In those early games, he was part of the deeper 2, and now he's higher up. And that means he's sprinting and he's pressing and he's doing much more longer, bigger space work. And I don't think that suits him. I think for him to be the player that you just described, where he reads the game, he needs to see the game. And I think he needs to save his effort for big defensive runs rather than big offensive runs. When he runs 15, 20 yards into the box, I don't feel something's going to happen. When Ramsey runs 15, 20 yards into the box, we all feel something could happen. Right? So the situation is they rotated it, but I felt Jack has spent a couple of games now quite high, which, you know, he's done some good things. It hasn't all been bad, but it now brings a lot of risk into his game, so his statistics are not going to look good. But if I trust someone to find a little trick, that's great. But what's it doing to him physically? I think it's hurting him. I think he was playing a 90-minute game when he plays deeper. When he plays higher, he looks like a 70-minute player. Right, and that is down to the distances and how he's having to do longer sprints. So I'm not sure I quite like the balance, but I'm not going to complain too much after a 2-0 win away from home at Milan. I'm not going to complain too much. And I think long as there's a rotation between him and Ramsey, and it really is a rotation and not them fighting for the same part of the pitch, but it's something that's designed, I can deal with it. I think if you see Ramsey high too much, no, that doesn't work. If you see Jack high too much, that doesn't work. I just think they need to rotate it and move around and rotate with Ozil and just be positionally smarter, and so they can save their legs and be a little bit more economical. Because physically, you're absolutely right. Ramsey's better physically from a metronomic point of view, but we have to look at our physicality at sprinting speed and power in centre mid if we want to be a league challenging team.
Yeah, I mean, you just look at through the middle of the pitch where you have players like Ozil, Wilshere, Xhaka, none of whom are hard-running players. I mean, Ramsey has a great motor and can get up and down the pitch, although not pacey. I mean, but he can get up and down the pitch, but there's just not a lot of athleticism or physicality there. And I actually thought right around that sort of 50 to 70 minute mark where we dropped and they came back into the match a little bit.
Yeah.
I think what was noticeable, and I think I tweeted this at the moment, we just miss that athletic, physical player in the center of the pitch who can put his foot on the ball and carry it 15 yards forward, bouncing off bodies, or chase someone down and shoulder them off the ball. Someone that makes it hard to run right through the middle of the pitch and says, you don't want to come into this space. You don't want to play into my area. We don't really have that. I think the midfield is a very comfortable place to play through Arsenal right now.
I think.
Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, I was going to say. I think you're right. So if you're projecting forward for Arsenal, there's something that's really happening to us, right? So we're a nice team to play. People look forward to playing us, right? They think they can have their moment against us. We're a Big Six team, and if of all the Big Six teams, we're the easiest ones to play if you catch us on the right day. If you catch us on the wrong day, then we can beat anyone else in the league. Do
you think Milan suffered from that, by the way, that maybe they thought, we can attack more, we can have a go at them, it's going to be, maybe that by thinking it would be a little too easy there, they weren't as safe as they needed to be? They didn't respect our ability to hurt them going at their goal?
I thought we had made some, in the right channel, Chambers and Mustafi, we made some schoolboy mistakes, right? But we got away with it. I thought Milan snatched at their chances. I thought they shot early when they didn't need to. They didn't play. Once Mustafi and Chambers had got attracted, they didn't recognise the spaces they had, and they just shot past the post, which is multiple times over the crossbar, crosses too high. And so when we were going through, I still felt we were a bit low at confidence in the first early stages of the game, but we got away with it and our confidence grew and it grew. And they, in Italy, what they do, they tend to work, they push up together, but when on the defensive side, they push back together. Mm-hmm. And if you start to give Xhaka space to play, he gets his rhythm. And you see Ramsey got his rhythm, Jack got his rhythm. We penetrated down the left-hand side. We doubled up. Ozil went from right to left, and he overloaded on that side. And they didn't pick it up. And Kolasinac had his best game for ages because he had combination people to work with. Welbeck was incredibly energetic and worked back very well in the tackles, despite the fact he doesn't know what his feet are doing. He was very good defensively from the front. And they allowed us to do it, much like Juventus allowed Spurs to dominate them in the away game. And I think some of the Italian teams, what they do naturally, they think, well, when we drop in and keep our spaces close, no one's going to play through us. You know what? Arsenal are really good at playing through the eye of the needle if you sit deep.
Well, when you have Mesut Ozil, it makes it a lot easier.
It makes it a lot easier. And Ozil's another one, right? We look at him and we wonder about him. And I heard something on the radio today, and it really made me think. If you watch Lionel Messi play football, what he does a lot is he walks around.
He's the walkiest player you will ever see until he's not, and then he kills you.
Exactly, and he walks. But what happens around Messi, he's got other people that run. And so no one says a word, plus his output's incredible. If you watch Ozil last night, the amount of time he was walking, but when the ball came to him, how many times was he in space? It's a skill. And again, what we've surrounded him with is maybe not the dynamic athletes that Barcelona have got in midfield now. They've got a bit more pragmatic, and they've added an extra player in there like a Paulinho and a Rakitic and Busquets, a bit more pragmatic historically, maybe taking the winger out to allow him to walk, to create the moment. At Arsenal, we've got a Walker that's a real delivery expert and assist maker, but we also ask him to defend because we've got other people that are not quite so dynamic. So when he doesn't defend, we all notice. So again, it comes back to balance. Again, we won the game, and I liked what I saw, and what I saw was a lovely togetherness and a confidence coming back, and it was the first brick in the road. We needed that brick of confidence, and maybe, sometimes, Elliot, we're like the team that another team needs to play to get confidence on occasion. I think Milan were perfect for us. A big team on the rise, not quite sure themselves, a full crowd. We could get confidence from this game if we were to win it when no one expected us to. Well, and we did.
Yeah, and let's be honest. I mean, a manager who is not particularly tactically astute. I mean, Gattuso's done a great job getting them into form, but from what I understand, he's more about getting them motivated, picking an 11, picking the right players. But I don't think he is a master tactician. And whatever the plan was, it certainly wasn't the right way to play us. Before we say goodbye here to this sensational bonus section, which none of our listeners deserve but are getting anyway, I want to talk about Mkhitaryan. He hasn't come up yet. He's a player that I think, all have really high hopes for, mainly because we have to. He's a player that's going to be with us for a while. He's not going to have any sell-on value when he eventually goes. He came in exchange for Alexis, who, granted, maybe wasn't having the time of his life the last few weeks before he left, is a sensational player. And we saw some glimpses of what he's capable of against Everton, and then it kind of vanished. Now, admittedly, against Spurs and City again, it's pretty easy for those things to vanish. But I thought he was the star performer on the night, and I'm curious to get your take on what worked and what you think it might mean for his role and his capability of boosting our attack going forward.
Well, we talked about Jack, we talked about Ramsey, we talked about Ozil, but the players that we picked on the night, that group, that's our best group of players, right? So we all accept that, right? Iwobi isn't at that level.
Well, I mean, a striker aside, but yeah.
Yeah, availability-wise,
right, yes.
That's what we had. So he picked the right players, and we can talk about the balance, but we had the right players. And Mkhitaryan coming on his right foot was really interesting, and I thought he was excellent. And what I liked about him, even on the goals and the one that hit the crossbar, as he's received the ball, you can almost see his brain thinking, I've got 2-3 touches. And when I get it onto my right foot, he didn't even look at the goal. He didn't look at it. He had complete clarity in what he was doing. He wasn't looking around, spinning his head, thinking, how can I shift this responsibility onto somebody else? He said, this is my moment. Good first touch, good second touch, smash it at the goal. And I love the clarity of thought. And good players take that shot. Right? They don't mess about. They take that shot. And he got his luck and he deflected in. He was unlucky when he hit the crossbar. And I just thought he held his position beautifully wide. He just separated himself away from them to give him chance to receive it a few yards. He's in control of his man because he's got such a nice touch and he doesn't look at the ball. He had his head up. So they're thinking he can pass here or he can shoot, but I'm frozen to the spot. Right? And so I have to wait to see what he does and react to him. And that's what good players make you do. They make you react to their movements. And I thought he was excellent. I thought he worked back well. And the whole thing was indicative of a collective spirit. I suppose the bigger question is, where did that spirit come from and where has it been? How was it generated and who generated it? Was it player generated or was it manager generated? Couldn't it just be occasion generated,
right? I mean, playing to try to get into 5th place in the Premier League, it's hard to lift yourself. Playing in the San Siro against a historic club, maybe not of the moment, but certainly of everybody's memory, AC Milan, that's enough to lift these players, isn't it? Absolutely. Touche, my son. And what does that make us? That makes us a cup team. Yeah, I don't disagree with that. And the progression for Arsenal has got to be, okay, how can we translate this into 3 times a week and a Tuesday night in Stoke? How can we translate some of the things we see here into a much more consistent execution and delivery? So we have to ask ourselves some questions. We have a big sample size of these players. We've seen them win cup games when they had no right to, and they've turned up and absolutely surprised us, and they've shown they can still do that. So we have to ask ourselves, what do we want to be? What type of players do we want? How do we introduce that every week consistency and dominance and durability that you need to be a top team? You look at the top players in the country, the ones that are playing regularly for City. De Bruyne, I don't think he's hardly missed a league game. Right? So you look at the durability and the availability of some of these players. They are available. They are there, they are present, they are consistent. And we have, like I say, we have some really good players who are there for moments, but they're not there for the season. Yeah. So thinking forward, what do you want to be? Even our favourite players, are they going to take us to the promised land? If they are, it's going to have to be done on them players looking after their bodies better, and the management defining their roles better. Because, back to Ramsey, I thought he played very well, very disciplined, and very much in centre midfield. And you know me, Elliot, if you're in that part of the pitch, I love it. If you're not where you should be, I'm not so keen. Yeah, no, that's totally fair. Look, I think as far as determining what we're going to be and winning, on a Tuesday night in Stoke, like the best solution may just be to have Stoke get relegated, and then we don't have to win on a Tuesday night in Stoke, or even West Brom or Swansea or Bournemouth, or get them all out, relegate them all. If you relegate 17 of them, top 4 is a breeze. So just something Absolutely. To think about. I really appreciate it. I think now the question is going to be, can we hold our nerve for the return leg, and then can we keep this going and let this be the springboard for the rest of this competition? We can certainly switch off in the Premier League for all I care, and I think for all the players care, or that anybody cares, maybe even the manager. We'll find out with this selection on Sunday. But sometimes, Clive, I think we underestimate the importance of luck and having it go for you a little bit, because while I thought there were a lot of good things about this performance, a lot of encouraging things, Suso blazed over from 8 yards out in the channel. They had opportunities where Chambers gifted them the ball at the back. There was Ospina coming for a corner and not getting there, and the header just glancing wide from point blank. There were moments. Where this could have been a different occasion, and I think it went for us today. And you know what? With the run we've been on, maybe we were due to have a few of those moments go our way. We've had calls go against us. We've had shots hit the woodwork. We've had things happen to us that maybe, I don't want to say we didn't deserve, but maybe have influenced the rut that we're in. So it was nice to have the breaks go our way for a change.
Absolutely. I think if it hadn't have done, it would have been like another Brighton, right? We'd have been 2 down and fighting back. Right? And so,
and I don't know that they have, you talk about the mentality, Clive, just to cut across you to keep this on brand. I think
that's okay.
When you're really, really low, it's one thing to drag yourself up for the occasion, get the lead, hold on to it, get a result. But when you fall behind, all of those doubts and questions flood back in your mind. So I think it was so important that we did get the first goal, that we did build some confidence, and then carried on from there. Let's call time on this. We will definitely talk to you after the friendly against Watford on Sunday, and then again after the return leg. Final thought, you feeling okay for progression now?
I'm going to the game. I'm going to Milan game. I want to see that for my own self and see what's happening around that pitch, the things that you can't see. So I'm looking forward to that. I will be okay after the first 5 minutes, right? And I think we should rest Koscielny for Watford, for definitely. I think he's had a lot of games, and I thought he played really well. I definitely think we need to make sure we have our best defenders available for that day, because they will feel emboldened if they score early. Away goals mean so much, right? So, I'll definitely, obviously, Welbeck needs to be kept free, did a lot of work.
Do we know when Lacazette's back?
Games. He's just started light training. So they said after the international break, I heard today.
Okay, so for the quarterfinal, assuming that we're
absolutely.
We're
so get through this one, and he's back, and that opens up a lot of options, right? Because that means the options of Welbeck and Lacazette away from home particularly would be good, and a good running power to turn teams around. I think that makes us more offensive. Lacazette can be eased back in, so that's nice. Mkhitaryan now shown somebody. He's shown a bit of clutch, right? That shot, that first goal, he shows some clutch behaviours, so that'll boost him, first goal. So, it's amazing how football changes.
Yeah.
Before you know it, we talk about new contracts for the manager.
And I think one of the things players need, a manager needs, fans need, is a clear goal to focus on and to work towards. And football challenges you because it gives you these 4 trophies and says work towards all of them. But Arsenal have the advantage right now of focusing on this competition and trying to win this competition. And everything can be geared to that now, given our unfortunate situation in the league. So Clive's on Twitter at ClivePAFC. Clive, appreciate you giving us the bonus section that the fans deserve.
I've never been called a bonus, but I'll take it. Thanks a lot, man.
Yeah, well, I look at it this way. The bonus was the result. I think we'll all take it. And we will be back with you after the next one. So until then, we will be back with another podcast after Arsenal 10, Watford 0.